Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughn Manor. And it's Wednesday, and until recently, every Wednesday, I'd talk about something comic book related for Epic Comic Book Wednesday. But Epic Comic Book Wednesday was put on hiatus. You see, every Wednesday on my channel, I'll talk about a certain comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. And Steve Donahue on his channel would talk about that same comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. But then Steve Donahue's house was destroyed, probably by some super strong supervillain, and they probably had some big battle, and Steve had to throw his magic hammer at him, and well, it was a big disaster, and there was a lot of construction that needed to be done, which happens after superhero battles. You don't hear about it that often, but you know, it happens. And so because of all this construction, Steve Donahue wasn't able to do all the videos he wanted to do. Now, it seems like his house is back in order now, because he's back doing videos. But Epic Comic Book Wednesday is officially still on hiatus until August. Garbaugust. So, Screamin'Creamin'Olly on his channel has created this great reading event called Garbaugust, which is all about reading trashy books all month. And so I thought, well, how could I tie in Epic Comic Book Wednesday to Garbaugust? I mean, comic books are probably considered kind of trashy anyway. But then I thought about it. There are certain comics that are influenced not by other comics like superhero comics, but they're more influenced by other things, whether it be trashy movies or trashy books or whatever. And so the comic books I'm talking about today are all influenced by other trashy media. And so for Epic Comic Book Wednesdays in August, these are the comics that I will be talking about. Now, Steve is not going to be happy. This is going to be a long month for Steve. 5 Wednesdays. There are 5 Wednesdays in August. And each Wednesday, it's another. Do you think Steve is going to be able to make it all throughout the month? We'll see. We'll see if he doesn't go insane, because these are some trashy comics I'll be talking about right here. 5 of them. Okay. Let's start off with the least trashy. In fact, you might be surprised that this comic book is in here at all. These are all Marvel comic books. DC does trashy too, but no one does it quite like Marvel does. And this one you might think is not trashy, because this is actually one of the really popular Marvel characters. There's been what, 3 movies off this character, all of them bad, and there's been a TV show off this character, which I didn't get past the first episode, but maybe it was good. I don't know. But that character is the Punisher. The Punisher. And you might say, but the Punisher, a trashy comic? No way, man. But, as I said, all of these characters are influenced by characters outside of superhero comic books. The Punisher is basically Mac Bolan. Mac Bolan is a paperback original pulp series of novels about a character that's an awful lot like the Punisher. In his early novels, he even ran around in a skin-tight black outfit. And his origin is surprisingly similar to Frank Castle's here, where his family was killed by the mafia and he needed to get revenge, and just kept on getting revenge, and more revenge, and more revenge after that. So the Punisher, even though he started off basically as a Spider-Man villain, very quickly became modeled, I think, after Mac Bolan, because these two characters are very similar. This is basically, the Punisher is basically a men's adventure character who, if he wasn't wearing this skin-tight black outfit, could very well fit into a series of trashy paperbacks. Of course, he does go up against superheroes, but, you know, he uses guns. He shoots things. And I'm looking forward to... This is so Punisher right there. Look at that. I'm looking forward to talking about the Punisher. which I'm planning on doing the first Wednesday of Garbaugust. Steve Donahue is screaming somewhere. But don't worry, Steve, it only gets worse from here. So, these next ones, they progressively get more trashy as we go on. So the next one I'm going to be talking about is a character I haven't read since I was a little kid. And I just read this epic collection recently, and it was hilarious. This is Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider, who famously rides around on a motorcycle and has a skull head that's on fire. This is pretty much Ghost Rider's claim to fame. He has a skull head that's on fire. Oh, and he was turned into Ghost Rider by Satan. Yes, this was created in the 70s when everybody was like scared of the devil. And so that's what drives this comic. And this comic is pretty hilarious. It was much different than I remember it being when I was a little kid, when I thought it was just awesome, and it's still kind of awesome, actually, in a terrible way. The early issues are illustrated by the great horror writer artist Mike Ploog, who always draws in a kind of cartoony style, which really works for Marvel's horror comic book characters. Mike Ploog didn't last long on this comic. Mike Ploog never lasts long on any comic, although he was on Werewolf by Night for a while. But he really captures the absolute melodrama that this character requires. Now, like I said, this comic book's pretty hilarious. Let me give you an example. So, in this comic book, Satan is actually a character in this comic book. And he appears in this comic book. Satan does. Why, look, here he is now. Look, it's Satan. You know it's Satan because it says Satan himself. There's Satan himself, looking like he just walked out wearing the cheapest devil costume he could possibly find. It's hilarious. Satan is absolutely hilarious in this comic book. It's great in a terrible way. And right now, Steve is screaming even louder. He doesn't appreciate Ghost Rider. So yeah, Ghost Rider, it's pretty trashy. So, like I said, it's only getting more trashy from here. How much trashier can you get than Skull the Slayer? Skull the Slayer, who the hell is that, you're wondering? Well, Skull the Slayer, he doesn't get an epic collection because, you know, his comic book only lasted 8 issues. Now, Skull the Slayer, who journeys from the modern world to a place where dinosaurs still exist, and there's all kinds of dangers, and it's basically a Lost World adventure series, which is an awful lot of fun, but it's also really, really trashy. And like I said, it was so trashy, it only lasted 8 issues. And it had to be rescued. The storyline actually ended on a cliffhanger where Skull the Slayer, there's Skull there, Skull the Slayer was, you know, all tied up, and, you know, it was one of those classic, you know, stay tuned till next week type of endings. And then at the bottom it just said, no, there is no next issue. This is the end. Bye, guys. So if you were one of the 3 fans of Skull the Slayer, you must have been kind of pissed, I think. But you know you've got a trashy series that ends when you have to have your storyline picked up in Marvel 2-in-1 with The Thing. That's what The Thing did. If a comic book ended and the storyline wasn't finished, then you brought in The Thing, and The Thing would meet up with whatever character needed meeting up with, and The Thing would finish the story in Marvel 2-in-1, which is exactly what happened with poor Skull the Slayer. Now, I don't know if Skull the Slayer ever made an epic return in Marvel. Probably, Probably. No character vanishes completely. Although you might wish Skull the Slayer would be one. That's going to be fun to talk about. But wait, we're only on our 4th Wednesday now. What could possibly be trashier than Skull the Slayer? Well, how about our pal Killraven? Killraven, who... And this comic should have been good from the start. This is an interesting comic because it started out absolutely terrible. I mean, it started off absolutely terrible and then got interesting towards the end of its run. And at the end, the series was kind of wrapped up in a Marvel graphic novel, which was really interesting, actually. So it didn't stay completely terrible. It actually got pretty interesting. I'm probably being charitable to Killraven. It did, I mean, so this is basically about... This is such a weird comic book. So this is basically, it started off as War of the Worlds. Amazing Adventures featuring War of the Worlds. So basically they're taking H.G. Wells' idea of a Martian invasion. And they're just saying, there were 2 invasions, actually. The last Martian invasion, what year did it happen? Was it 2000? It was 2018. No, the invasion was earlier than that. When was the actual invasion? This story takes place in 2018. You may remember that. But actually, I can't remember, was it 2001? It probably was. Anyway, the Martians came back in the early 2000s after their initial war in H.G. Wells' book. But this time they were inoculated against all the diseases that would kill them off. And so they conquered the Earth. And in 2018, Killraven, who was one of the Martians' slaves, leads a rebellion. And he leads a rebellion in a really idiotic outfit. So this is Killraven, he's wearing his mankini there and his tall stripper boots. So he's got his mankini, he's got his stripper boots, he's got his sword, he's got his ray gun, he's got his headband. So you know he's from 2018. You know he's from the future. Now, the first issue of this, it was drawn by Neil Adams and Howard Chaykin. So the art should have been amazing. But it was mostly crap. It starts off okay, but then in the course of a few pages, it just turns instantly to crap. It's like everybody was like working on this and said, this is terrible. And then just, stopped caring. And the first few issues of Killraven were pretty terrible. The War of the Worlds, which became Killraven. It's a whole thing. So Killraven eventually, he got rid of his mankini and got this more manly outfit to wear. I don't know who approved the mankini at Marvel, but I don't know. But they're like mutants and monsters and all kinds of weird stuff in Killraven. It should have been fantastic. It wasn't, but it did get interesting later on. So I look forward to talking about that. So what are we going to finish off Garbaugust with? Probably, I don't know if this isn't the worst character Marvel ever came up with. That was probably Speedball. But they had some pretty bad characters, and this character is terrible. So you might wonder, why on earth do I have a gigantic omnibus of Morbius the Living Vampire? There is no explanation except for I might be insane. Might be. But I do. I have this gigantic omnibus of Morbius, who is one of the most ridiculous Marvel characters of all time. And pretty much terrible. He showed up into Journey. He started off as a Spider-Man villain, as so many characters do. And he was kind of fun as a Spider-Man villain. Spider-Man had some, funky villains, and this one was pretty goofy. But somebody thought, we've got all these horror comic books. Let's make one more, and let's make Morbius one of our horror characters. So they said, sure, we'll do that. So he became a star in the black and white magazine Vampire Tales. And if that wasn't enough Morbius, if you wanted more Morbius, he also showed up in Journey into Fear in the color comic book. I guess everybody at Marvel just loved Morbius. Morbius was one of the most ridiculous looking comic book characters in the world. Look at his ridiculous outfit. The dumbest... I mean, he doesn't look as bad as Satan did in Ghost Rider, but he's up there. He looks like he shopped at the same cheap Halloween store to get his outfit. I'll have fun talking about Morbius. I know they made a recent film about Morbius, which I hear is terrible, which I thought, cool, it's, you know, accurate to the source material. But yeah, Morbius. We're going to talk about Morbius in the last week of Garbaugust. Right now, Steve is passed out from screaming so much. He's going to have a rough month. Steve, I apologize in advance. We'll talk a lot about Spider-Man and Thor the rest of the year. But this is Garbaugust, so, you know, all the trash is coming to you in August. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.